Bobby, were you drafted or did you enlist?
Drafted.
Do you recall the date?
Not really.
Do you recall the year?
1965.
And where were you living at the time?
In Plainville.
So you're born and brought up in Plainville?
No, I was born in Yonkers, New York. I moved up here when I was about 14.
How old were you at the time? Had you already graduated from high school?
When I went into the service, yes.
So you were drafted into the Army?
Yes.
Do you recall your first days in service?
November. I'm not positive. I think for some reason 15. November 15.
And where did you go to start off your service?
The military bases.
Well, where did you go for your induction first?
I believe it was in New Haven.
And then once you were inducted, did you immediately leave for basic training?
They put us on a bus and drove down to Fort Dix, New Jersey.
How long were you at Fort Dix?
During my basic training, I believe from November to the end of January, I believe it was.
What was basic training like?
Cold, wet, damp, nasty.
What did you learn in basic training? What was it like? What did they teach you?
Military skills, you know, basic hand-to-hand combat, how to take an order, weapons, physical training, you know, typical stuff you would learn in the military.
Do you recall any of your instructors from basic?
I'm trying to think of his name, but we did have one. But what was funny about my experience in basic training was we had a guy that had prior service. He was going back into the military. And with his knowledge, we come out smelling like a rose, because he told us to be the biggest screw-ups for the first 3 weeks of basic training. We flunked every test, every inspection. We were last in the whole group. And the sergeant, his name will come to me, but I can't remember it right offhand, was just totally devastated by our performance. So the fourth week, we came in third. And he was so delighted the fact that we came in third. So by us doing it that way, he actually backed off on us because we showed such an improvement. And in retrospect, we actually ended up getting more privileges than the guys that have been going along with the system. And then the fifth, sixth, seventh week, we came in between second to first place. So they gave us, you know, the freedom of the post. Saturday was like, boom, 12 o'clock, you're gone. And so it was a good experience to know how to play the system.
Wow, good strategy.
Yeah, so.
Now that fellow, was he in your group?
Yeah, he was in our unit.
So he wasn't in charge of you. He was
No, he had prior service. He decided to go back in.
But so you have to go through basic training again?
Well, he had been out long enough, so he had to come back in and take basic training again.
Do you have any memorable experiences from basic training?
Yeah, never volunteer. Volunteered once. They asked me if I had a driver's license, and I said yeah. So they gave me a wheelbarrow. Said, drive this over here. It was the last time I ever volunteered for anything.
After basic training, where did you go?
I went to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, to the 57th Petroleum Outfit.
57th?
I believe that's what it was, 57th Petroleum.
And what were you there for?
To drive a fuel tanker. heavy equipment.
Did you choose that duty, or did the Army choose it for you?
The Army chose it for me.
Did you have prior experience in that?
To some extent I did.
So at Fort Leonard Wood, how long were you there and what did they train you for exactly?
I believe I got there in February, and we did simulation runs of delivering fuel to various locations, which was nothing but water. We were just simulating the runs in the dead of winter. And if you've ever been in Missouri, it's like being in South Korea, because that's what they used to call it, Little Korea, because it's so cold there. So I did that, and I got my orders for Vietnam in June.
June of 65?
June of
66 it must have been
66.
then. What kind of a truck were you driving in Missouri?
Fuel tanker, tractor trailer like they use to fill up gasoline stations.
Did you have to have a special license for that?
Yes.
Did you have classroom instruction at the same time, or was it all in the field practicing on the
It
truck?
was both. We had, on-hands experience, and then we had classroom studies.
As a tanker driver, did you have to know anything about the truck, or did you just have to know how to drive it?
Oh, no, there are procedures that you had to follow, the safety procedures, the characteristics of the vehicle, how to properly load and unload your product, and,
So
the
you
safety
had to do
precautions.
all that
Yeah.
in addition to then driving it to wherever you had to.
Right, yeah.
In June, when you got your orders for Vietnam, did you know when you were in Missouri that you were going to be going to Vietnam?
Everybody knew they were going to Vietnam. Just a matter of when.
Did you have leave before you went, or did you go
I
directly?
had 30 days.
What did you do on your 30-day leave?
I worked 2 weeks. The first 2 weeks I was there, and then the last 2 weeks I spent with my girlfriend.
And what was it like getting over to Vietnam?
Scary. I remember flying in to Tan Snoot Air Base, which was just outside of Saigon, and it had to be around midnight when we flew in. It was hot, sticky, and we went to, I believe it was 62nd, I'm not positive, but it was a replacement center just outside of Tan Snoot Air Base. And like 2 or 3 in the morning, we actually got shelled.
On your first night in
My
country?
first night, yeah. We were at the end of the airport where the helicopters were parked, and they were trying to knock out a few helicopters. So they were mortaring the helicopter pad.
What were you thinking? That must have been pretty scary. Your first night in country, you're not even there a couple hours and you're being shelled?
That's for sure. We didn't even have weapons. We were just a replacement center.
What did you do?
Found me a hole.
So you went in as an individual, you didn't go in with a unit?
No, because my original unit, doing basic training, we all got split up. Some went infantry, some went to different areas, whatever their expertise was at the time. And so I ended up there, actually knowing nobody from my unit. So when I went to Missouri, and then when I went from, when I came from the States to Vietnam, in 1966 they had an airline strike. And so my first intentions were to fly out the 29th day of my leave to get to California. Oakland, California is where I departed from. And there was no airlines flying out because of the strike. So I took a bus my 30th day, and it took me 3 days to get there. So a lot of the guys that were in the original petroleum outfit had already gotten there. I was 3 days late. So the president at the time actually gave an extension because of the fact that the airlines were down. So all the guys that I originally left with, they all departed different areas. So when I went to Vietnam, I was totally by myself.
Wow. How long were you at the replacement center?
Wasn't long, 2 or 3 days.
And where was your first assignment?
Cam Bay.
What was that like, and what did you do there?
It's a replacement center. You go up there, and there's where they determine what outfit they're going to assign you to. And I was assigned to 62nd Engineers out of Phan Rang, which is about 50 miles away south of Cam Bay.
So how long were you at Cam Bay? Just long enough to get
I
assigned?
believe it was probably about a week.
And then they assigned you to the 62nd Engineers. And you knew then, because you'd been trained to drive fuel truck, that that's what you were going to be doing?
That's what my intentions were, you know, or my expectations were, to drive a fuel tanker.
And so then you went to, what is it, Phan Rang?
Phan Rang, yes.
How long did you stay in Phan Rang?
Look, that's 45 years ago.
Well, I mean, is it days, weeks, months?
Oh, no, I was there for quite a while. In fact, our unit was, I believe it was supposed to be the first unit to move as a whole unit from Phan Rang. We went down to Benoit, just outside of Saigon, as a whole unit. We were transferred there.
But not right away?
Not right away.
So what was it like for the months that you were in Phan Rang?
The weather was pretty nice because we were in a valley. We had Air Force, the 101st Airborne, a South Korean, their elite group, they were like our Green Beret. They were down on the south end of the runway, protecting the runway. And when I was there, I did work on the, the runway. We were making fighter aprons. It's a parking area for the Phantom jets, because we had Phantom jets right there. And then
So what do you mean you were working on that?
driving tanker, what I was doing was hauling water to water down the roads to keep the dust down.
What other things did you do while you were at Phan Rang?
And then I learned from my first experience as far as volunteering. And they were asking if anybody would be interested to learn how to operate radios. So I volunteered, figuring I was just going to sit in a nice air-conditioned Quonset hut and operate a radio. So they they sent me back to Cam Bay for, I believe it was 3 to 4 weeks for radio training. And I just had to learn the basics. Never learned Morse code. It was just primarily the operation and the maintenance of radios.
What kind of radio did you?
One was an RC-25, which was an old World War II radio. There were actually 3 of them. Then the one that was on the Jeep, and I can't remember what it was. And then we had another one, which was a big one. was in the back of a three-quarter deuce, three-quarter pickup truck.
So you learned how to operate all three of those radios?
Right, for different various locations that we had them in.
After your 3 or 4 weeks of radio training, did you go back to Fang Rang?
I went back to Fang Rang, and the very next day I was introduced to my new radio station, which was mounted on a Jeep.
So now you weren't going to drive fuel trucks anymore?
No, I was radio operator and driver on a Jeep that did convoys from Fang Rang to Cameron Bay to the Trang on a daily basis.
All right, so you didn't learn your lesson about volunteering. All right, your convoy. So describe to me what a convoy would do, and you're going out every day on one of these, and what your job specifically in that convoy would be.
In the Jeep, we had a lieutenant who was in charge of the convoy, the driver, and the radio operator. He had dual responsibilities. He was a radio operator and a machine gunner on the Jeep. The driver?
Jeep driver?
No, there were 3 of us in the Jeep. The driver, and the radio operator. He was the radio operator and the machine gunner. We used to alternate, the driver and I. We both knew how to use the radio. So if one of us got wounded or killed, there was always somebody else to operate the radio. And then we were the lead vehicle on the convoys. And our daily run was to Fang Rang, Cameron Bay, which was approximately 50 miles away from Fang Rang, where we would load up supplies and bring them back to Fang Rang.
How large is a convoy? How many vehicles would be in
It varied. It could, on the average, it would probably be maybe 30, 40 vehicles of different shapes and sizes. Some fuel tankers, flatbeds, hauling equipment, building material, medical supplies, the typical stuff, small arms, ammunition.
So you would go to Cameron Bay every day to pick up materials and
Bring
it
it back, yeah.
Do you have any memorable incidents from any of those convoys?
Oh, there's quite a few of them, but one that we used to always go through Coconut Grove, which were, these coconut trees were actually hand planted, so they were in perfect line with each other. And we used to always get sniper fire through there. And there was only 1 or 2 rounds. And so the lieutenant had us call in a helicopter to rake the area. And so the helicopter would respond to us within a couple of minutes. And they raked it with a mini Gatling gun. And the farmer that owned the coconut grove was just totally freaked out. He was throwing coconuts at us as we were going by because we just destroyed his crop. But that was for the most part. And then during we have the monsoon season, and to a certain extent we would still travel to the point where we couldn't, because the monsoon, it could bring water into that valley so fast and so quick, it would completely cover the road. So we used to put markers out on the road to outline the road, and at night the Viet Cong or the North Vietnam, but it was mostly the Viet Cong, would move the stakes off to the side, and you wouldn't know until a big truck would go by, and the next thing you know, he slid off the road down into the rice paddy. We lost a few vehicles, so then they suspended the convoys during during the monsoon season.
So how long would that be?
That could be a month, you know, depending on the rain.
Tell me a little bit about the vehicle you drove. Did you always have the same Jeep? Were you in charge of that
Right.
Jeep?
Yes, that was my Jeep.
What can you tell me about the Jeep you had?
Well, we used to pack it with sandbags on the floor to keep any shrapnel from coming up. It was an M151 Jeep. Had a tripod welded to the floor with an M60 machine gun on it.
M60?
The M60, yeah. Had a World War II radio. It had the receiver on one side and the transmitter on the other side, and you spent most of the time trying to calibrate the radio as you were traveling, because every time you hit a bump it would throw it out of calibration. Other than that, it was open, no armor plating, stuff like they have today, you know.
Now, the World War II radio, was that one of the radios you had been trained on?
Right.
What would you do as you were driving along? If you were the if you were the radio operator, you were constantly on the radio trying to calibrate it?
I wouldn't say constantly, but I would always check on the radio because I would be listening to other communications that were on the radio. So if I didn't hear them, then I knew I was off, so I'd redial it back in on them. You know, because we were always in touch with a helicopter if we needed them.
So was the helicopter part of your convoy?
No, they would
Close
be
by.
patrolling different areas around, but we had this one channel that we could go and ask for assistance, you know.
Other than the time with the coconut grove, did you have to ask for assistance?
Yeah, because one time we actually, they blew up the bridge just enough so we couldn't go over it. So the convoy was dead in its tracks. And then they came down. It took a while, but they came down with a military scissor bridge, and literally put it right across the creek. And then because Highway 1 is up in that area is no wider than most of your little secondary neighborhood roads. It was very narrow.
And this was Highway 1 that you were traveling
Right.
on every day?
And then, yeah, and it's not like you could turn a tractor trailer around in it, because most of the road is up above the ground level. So we were stuck there until we could, you know, make a bridge so we could drive around it, you know. But we had helicopters, and then I believe it was the 101st Airborne came down to assist us.
Now, when you weren't on the radio, you were the gunner. Can you tell me something about the M60 machine gun?
It's a automatic rifle, machine gun. I believe it shoots about like 700 rounds a minute. And
Where were you trained on that? In basic training, or did you have the camera on?
actually, I was in Vietnam. I was trained on it.
Do you recall any other memorable incidents while you were doing the convoys?
Oh, there was a lot of things. You'd be surprised how ingenious some of those Vietnamese were. They would, during the rice harvest time, they would take a 1-ton truck and probably put 4 ton of rice on it and get it to the market. And you would see them break down, and they would actually have the truck jacked up on 2 55-gallon drums, and they'd pull the whole rear end out. And a couple days later, you come back and it's completely gone. They put that thing back together and take off. They didn't have AAA over there, you know, so.
Were there any casualties in your unit?
Sadly, yes, but most of them were non-hostile.
Once you became a radio operator, is that what you stayed doing for the rest of your time in Vietnam, or did you go back to operating a truck?
No, and then our unit moved from Phang Rang down to Ben Hoa, which was, I believe, north of Saigon. And
You
we
recall when that was?
I'm going to say it's sometime in '67.
So your entire unit packed up and moved
Right.
all the equipment?
Yep. On an LSD, the ship.
Do you know why that was?
Generals didn't let me know. So, but we moved as a unit, and we came into Freeport, was the name of the spot where we docked in, which was a military harbor that we came in. We actually had to come up the Mekong Delta. So,
Now, where you were going, was there anything there? Were you setting up a brand new base?
brand new area.
So, what did you set up? Was it just for your unit or an entire base?
Was for our whole battalion.
How large
they-
is a battalion? Like hundreds or thousands?
Hundreds. Great, it's been so long. But with the 62nd Engineer outfit, the whole bang of everybody.
So what
But-
was that like setting that up?
Well, prior to us getting there, they did have some of the area cleared out. So there were some areas to accommodate us, you know, as far as living quarters, you know, but that was it. But and then it was just a matter of us cutting ourselves an area within the surrounding areas, you know. We made a motor pool, and you know, just it was everybody worked hard, you know, make
How
roads.
long did it take you to set up the base?
I mean, even when I left, they were still working on it. But I mean, it was just a constant, you know, thing to do. You know, I mean, the essential things were to set up the water purification center, you know, to purify the water. One of the essential things that we needed. The mess halls, you know, and you know, the bathroom areas, you know, shower areas, the essential stuff that we needed. And then from there we started, you know, opening up different areas, widen what would be our garage or our motor pool area, and so on and so on, you know. And then we had to clear all the jungle from around us. You know, we went out 500 meters, you know, they call that the killing zone, you know, so we didn't have anybody come right up on us. Then we had to cut roads in, you know, so there was a lot of work.
So you weren't a radio operator on a convoy anymore, you were basically working within the perimeter, setting up this new base?
Yeah, I mean, it varied. At sometimes I would actually operate a bulldozer, which I had prior experience on in
Before
civilian
you went
life.
into this-
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So,
What were your duties while you were at Benoit? Did it ever get developed enough where you were out going on convoys again?
there was no need to, because the fact that we were so close to Saigon, so everything was coming up on a daily basis at a Freeport and everything else. So, plus Tan Son Nhut Air Base was close by, so a lot of stuff got flown in. So,
So where were we?
no, at Tan Son Nhut Air Base.
Oh, so
and,
you're that, how close were you to Tan Son Nhut?
Tan Son Nhut, probably from where we were maybe 3-4 miles.
Oh,
Yeah.
extremely close.
Yeah.
So your duties then the whole time that you were at Benoit were mostly setting up the base?
Yeah, as far as operating equipment, and then there were times that I did security as far as guard duty with the radio. We would be out in the wood line, you know, to protect our area as, you know, they were coming in with the construction equipment to clear out the jungle. So
Were there any incidents of enemy contact while you were at Benoit?
it was just minor, you know, pot shot here and there, you know. I wasn't what I consider self in the combat on a daily basis, even though there was no, as far as I was concerned, there was no such thing as a, you know, battle line, you know, because anywhere in Vietnam, I always said what the Vietnamese work with you during the day, they're the ones you're fighting at night.
So you had Vietnamese people working with you?
Yeah, we had some civilians working.
Did you trust them?
No.
Was there ever any incidents where you knew of a Vietnamese?
Oh, we've actually had them, we've caught them, because they have to go through a screening when they're leaving the base. And we found one that actually had 4 rounds in each of his sneakers. So that was just one that we caught. So as a Viet Cong sympathizer, and this guy's working 5 days a week, you know, that's 40 rounds a week that this guy's getting out of the facility. So it became a major issue with the security.
Did you see any combat?
Not really.
Most of the combat-related incidents were when you were driving convoy.
Convoy, yeah.
Were you awarded any medals or citations?
No. Other than the normal,
The Vietnamese?
the Vietnam Service Medal and Good Conduct Medal, and I believe there's a Vietnam campaign ribbon or something to that effect.
How long were you at Benoit?
For the rest of my tour in Vietnam,
When did you leave Vietnam?
in September '67.
Do you have any memorable experiences you can recall from your time at Benoit?
Other than being a short timer, not really.
Well, what was that like when you got, what was considered a short timer?
Anything under 90 days.
Did you document it with a calendar or anything like that?
Yeah, everybody did, you know. I actually extended in Vietnam 2 more months
Why did you do that?
because I had 5 months left to do of tour, and so I had a choice of going to Fort Benning, Georgia for 5 months, or stay where I was for 2 more months and get out under the 90 days. And if you had less than 90 days from Vietnam, you just got to go home. So my choice was to stay where I was. So I actually did 1 year, 1 month, and 29 days total tour of Vietnam, so I could get out of the service.
Well, you were taking a chance. Were you stationed at Benoit at that time when you made that decision? Or were you at...
No, I was at Benoit at the time, and it was pretty good duty there. It was pretty secure.
So what was it like once you got under the 90 days? In your case, it was extended longer, but when you were a short timer, did you behave differently?
A lot more cautious. Didn't go down to town as much because you never knew what was happening around down there. So you stayed on base mostly, you know, and just try to get through your days so you could get out.
What would a typical day be like for you? Well, and your typical day when you're driving convoy was different than your typical day at Benoit. What's a typical day when you were driving convoy like? What time would you get up?
Usually we're up and about by 6 in the morning. Convoy would probably start by 7. We would get to Fang Rang, depending on the road conditions and everything. Probably I would say some in the neighborhood around 11 o'clock. And there we would pull into Fang Rang, Cameron Bay rather. And then we would all congregate right outside of Fang Rang to go back on Highway 1.
No, you mean in Cameron Bay to go back to Fang Rang?
To go back to Fang Rang, yeah. That was typical. And then once in a while...
You did that all in one day?
Yeah, up and
Drove
back.
out to Cameron?
Yeah.
So what time would you get back to Fang Rang?
Usually around 5 or 6, just before the sun goes down. Yeah. But then once in a while we had to go up to Latrang, which was about another 25 miles.
And you'd still do that in one day and be back to your...
If we were lucky, we were hoping we couldn't do it and we'd have to spend the night there and come back.
Why, was Latrang nice?
Latrang was an in-house R&R town, so it was like being let out and go to Vegas for the night. So if we could stay there long enough where we wouldn't be able to get back during daylight, we would have to spend the night there and then come back the following morning. Once in a while we pulled it off. Vehicle broke down or something, you know. Mechanical failures always seem to be a good one, you know.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So what would a typical day be like for you when you were at Benoit?
6 in the morning to 6 at night, 12-hour days, 7 days a week. You know, that's what our shifts were.
No fun?
No.
And I'm going to switch gears and ask you some questions about daily life in Vietnam. When you were overseas, how did you stay in touch with your family?
Letters.
Were you a letter writer?
No.
Was your family?
Pretty much, yeah.
What was the food like?
The military food?
Well, when you were at your bases, did you have regular mess halls where you got 3 meals a day?
Yeah, yeah. When we were on base, yes.
When you were doing your convoys, what did you do?
If we were lucky, we could eat in Cameron Bay, and sometimes we had to have sea rations, you know, for lunch.
How was the base food?
It's like anything else, you just get used to it.
Did you have any shortages of anything? Food, ammunition, supplies, vehicles, anything like that?
Well, equipment, there was always shortage, you know, the parts primarily. You know, as far as getting repair parts. But as far as anything else, we were pretty, you know, pretty much had everything we needed.
How about parts for your radios?
They were antiques.
Could you even get parts?
Some of it, you know, for the most part, you know,
What would you do
they
if
were
one
antique.
broke?
Yeah.
You have to learn
Well,
how to fix it.
yeah, they, you know, if you were lucky, you might get it something that was a little more upgrade, you know. But for the most part, they kept them running, you know.
How did you handle the pressure or the stress while you were in Vietnam?
I am myself personally, I think my biggest shocker was when I saw Vietnamese kids that were 9, 10, 11 years old that were more life smart than I was. And it really kind of took me by surprise. And here I'm 20 years old and these kids knew more about life than I did. And to a certain extent, I kind of like fed off of that. Here, they're surviving for life, and I'm complaining about dinner. So it kind of like woke me up a little as far as how they were surviving daily with their parents dead and no place to live, but yet they're out in the street surviving day in and day out. So to a certain extent, you kind of appreciate life a little more.
Did you do anything special for good luck?
Not really.
How about entertainment? What did people do for entertainment?
Drink. 19 years old.
Other than drinking, what did you do?
I played cards. I had a few little enterprises. You know.
Anything you'd like to share?
Well, I won't tell you where it came from, but I will tell you that because of our engineering outfit, we had HVAC units, personnel, and we were sent down to MACV headquarters to check on an ice maker. And I informed my superiors that the compressor was no good, so they told us to remove it off the premises, and we took it back to our unit, and I put it in a metal container, and what it was nothing but the freon was gone. So we gassed it back up, ran a power cord from the motor pool to the container, and I put a 55-gallon drum of sterilized water up on top, and we were making ice cubes.
That was pretty ingenious.
And I was selling them in a brand new nylon sandbag for $1 a bag, and I was making pretty good money.
Was a hot item, huh?
Oh, I even had officers come around and ask me if I had clean ice. I go, yeah. So sterilized. And then they would ask me how much. I said, $2 a bag.
So the officers had to pay double?
Yeah, why not?
Did you see any USO shows while you were over there?
Yeah, in fact I did. Trying to think who it was. Oh, I never got to see Bob Hope, but I'm not positive. I think it was Nancy Sinatra. I think that's who it was.
Where was it?
I think it was just outside of Saigon.
Did you have any R&R or leave while you were overseas?
Yeah. I went to Hawaii
You did? How
Yeah.
long?
for a week.
What was that like?
Beautiful.
What did you do?
Went to the beach, ate, had a good time, partied all week.
And how long was that?
For 7 days.
What was it like after being on leave and then having to go back to Vietnam?
Depressing. But you try not to think about it while you were out there.
Did you have any other R&R or weekends, shorter ones?
In-house, I had some. You know, we could get days off here and there. You know, you put in for a leave time.
And where would you go?
Benoit. We were kind of restricted as far as where we could go. Saigon was out of our zone because it was probably about 30 miles away. But they used to shuttle us down to Benoit, which was the local town. And then they had bars and the typical cat houses, and you know, they had stores. And you know, you could shop, eat, and, you know, spend the day down there.
Do you recall any particularly humorous or unusual events?
Eating locally once. A bunch of us were eating, I can't remember the hotel, but it was in Benoit. And the courtyard was probably about 40 feet wide. It was kind of a upscale hotel. And we were up in the balcony overlooking the walkway, and we were all, my buddies, 3 other buddies, myself, were eating what we thought was chicken stew, until my buddy goes, "Ooh, I bit into something." He pulls out, and what it was 3 fingers of a monkey. So all 4 of us were puking over the balcony.
Oh, God.
The waitress calling us number 10 GIs. Meanwhile, we're puking down on everybody down there. That was,
It's gross.
yeah.
So you ate monkey?
Well, I think so.
Do you recall any other unusual or humorous events?
That was probably one of the highlights of my time.
What did you think of the officers? What was your rank?
E4.
So what was your opinion of the officers you had?
We had a sergeant major that was, there wasn't anybody that wouldn't follow that guy. He had the respect of everybody in our company. Where we had some lieutenants that, you know, be the last person I'd want to be have in charge.
Do you recall the name of that sergeant major?
I think it was Winters. I'm not positive. Sergeant Major Winters, yeah.
What did you think of your fellow soldiers?
Same as civilian life. Some you swear by and others you swear at. You know, some I would trust and some I wouldn't.
Did you develop any close friendships while you were over there?
There were a few.
Did you stay in touch with them after the war?
It's like everything else, you know. You do for a little while, then, you know, everybody goes their own way.
When you were on short time, do you recall what your last days in Vietnam were like?
My last days?
Yes, your last days and your last day.
I think I was up all night. Just participating in being able to get on that plane and go.
Did you fly out on a military plane or a civilian?
Civilian.
You came in as an individual. Did you leave as an individual?
Yep.
What was it like getting on that plane and taking off?
I was happy to go, but yet I was sad to leave. You know, it was a strange feeling because of the friends that I had developed over the year. You know, here I'm getting to go home, but yet they're staying. But yet in the same token, I'm glad I am leaving because I already did my time. You know, and it was a mixed feeling.
Where did you land in the United States when you got back?
Oakland, California.
Well, same place you took off from?
Yep.
Now, because you had extended the 2 months.
Wait a minute, come to think of it, I think it was Travis Air Base when I flew in. Yeah, I think I flew into Travis, I'm not sure. But I went to Oakland, you know, to get separated from the service.
Because you had extended the extra 2 months, you were going to be immediately discharged from service?
I think I would have gotten maybe a week's leave to go home, and then I would have had to go to Fort Benning for 5 months.
So you went to Oakland, is that where you were discharged?
I was discharged from Oakland.
How long were you in Oakland before you got discharged? Was it immediate?
Within, I would say within 72 hours.
Wow, that was pretty quick from being
Yeah,
in
I mean,
Vietnam to being...
well, most of the stuff, as far as turning in all my equipment, was done in Vietnam. So it was just a paper trail, basically, you know, California. And then from there, they said...
Do you recall your very last day in service?
In September. That's all I remember.
Do you remember what the day was like?
Probably one of the greatest days of my life.
So this was September of 1967?
7, yeah. Because nobody knew I was coming home.
They didn't? Your
No.
family didn't know?
No, nobody did.
Well,
So,
why didn't you tell them?
well, I guess maybe I just wanted to keep it to myself.
Well, that must have been quite a surprise. So how did you get from Oakland to Connecticut?
Military standby. And I flew in. It wasn't a direct flight. I think I went to Chicago, and from there to Jersey, and then up to Connecticut.
So you flew into Bradley and your family still didn't know you
No,
were coming home?
nobody knew.
Well, how'd you get from the airport home?
Oh, you could hitch a ride easily. In those days, there was no problem hitching
So
a
you
ride.
hitchhiked?
Yeah, hitched right.
What was the reaction when you walked in your house?
Actually, the first person I saw, I was the girl I was going out with at the time, because she used to get the bus to go to Hartford. So I surprised her. So she didn't want to go, and I said, "Joe, you know, we'll be together." My dad was the town engineer of Plainville, so I knew his schedule. So he would go into the diner that I was in, and he sat down, and I walked right up, and I said, "Move over," and I freaked him out a little. And so then he wanted to take me home. I go, "No, you know, I'm just gonna take my time," and you know, it was no big rush. So I gave him all my stuff and threw it in his trunk. And I said, "I'm just, you know, just gonna hang around, take my time." So where I used to work was right around the corner. So I walked into my old boss, you know, and then he goes, "You coming to work tomorrow?" I go, "No." "I'll see you in a couple of weeks." So I went back to the same job that I was doing when I left. Then I finally made it home. And
Did your mother get word from somebody else, or were you?
no, I asked my dad not to say nothing, and he did. So, you know, and then I saw my, you know, my siblings, you know. Then we had a big dinner, you know. You know, it was kind of nice, you know. I didn't want to make a big fanfare out of it, you know. I just wanted to come in, you know, more or less like carry on from when I left, you know. So,
What did you do in the next couple of weeks immediately after getting discharged?
just tried to grasp of all the changes that were locally, you know, see who was around, who wasn't. You know, I knew I had a job, so I wasn't worried about that. And, you know, spend time with friends, you know, catch up on stuff. Go out and buy a vehicle, you know, stuff that you had to do. And
Did you notice a big difference in the country from when you had left for Vietnam?
oh, well, the total outcome of the college students was totally different from the time I left to the time I got back. You know, they were totally anti-Vietnam. You know, so that was kind of disappointing compared to what these kids are getting today compared to what we got in Vietnam. Most people didn't want to wear their uniforms once they got discharged. You know.
Did you wear yours?
I had to get military standby, you know, for the flights. I was still proud of my uniform no matter what. You know, I served my country. I did what I was supposed to do. So I wasn't ashamed of what I did, you know, so. But I'm glad to see the support that these kids get today coming out of Afghanistan and Iraq.
Now, you said your job was waiting for you. Your employer, when you left, did he say he would hold your job for you?
Yeah, well, in fact, you know, he actually got me a year's deferment, and I turned it down. For one, he never asked me, and my thing was, why take it? Because I'm just going to go in a year later. And by me getting out when I did, if I had stayed for another year, I would have been dead smack in the middle of Tet Offense, because I was still been over there. So I got out just before, because I got out in September, and Tet Offense became that December and January.
So after you'd been home a couple weeks, you went back to your original job. What was that job?
No, I was actually a plumber's helper.
Did you go back to school on the GI Bill at all?
Yep. I went and I got my master's in plumbing. Well, now they call it contractors, but it
Where
was a
did you-
master of plumbing. Goodwin Tech in New Britain.
So you were a plumber then?
Yeah, I was plumber's helper, apprentice. And then I went back to school, got my, well, in those days we used to call it master plumber license. And then I eventually opened up my own plumbing company.
Did you join any veterans organizations?
Yes and no. I joined a VFW down in Terrytown, New York, and I had mixed feelings of the VFW at the time, because the vast majority of the vets were World War II. They were in the big war. Vietnam was nothing but a little skirmish. So I kind of separated myself from it. And even when I came up here, this original VFW was on the other side of town. And I went there and basically got the same reception, that Vietnam was nothing but a little skirmish. So I kind of separated myself from it. And I got involved with this place, I guess like almost 2 years ago.
So, and this is the VFW in Plainville,
It is,
Connecticut.
yeah, it's 574.
Are you active in this post?
I'm the commander.
So I guess you're very active. What
Uh,
kinds of activities do you guys engage in?
We do a lot of we do donate a lot to the community. The post itself, our problem here is, like most posts, the World War II vets are getting too old to be more active.
Now, Bobby, I know that your brother, Doug, was also in Vietnam and in fact was killed in action over there. Can you tell me a little bit about that and how that affected you?
It was a kind of a, well, it was a big time shocker, but
Did he go in the service before or after you?
after. He, in fact, November before he went to Vietnam, he was actually a pallbearer for a distant cousin of mine that was killed in Vietnam. And then he went over, and the best of dates that I came up with was February 9th, 1969. He was listed as missing. And then him and another soldier were on a detail, and they were ambushed. And then approximately a month later, the locals told the military that they were buried in a shallow grave. And then he came back. You know, we got him back. I almost went back in the service for the anger that I had in me. But I had two younger other brothers besides, and they both went in the service. One was in the Army and the other one went in the Marines. So
There were 4 of you boys and you all went in service during the Vietnam War?
yeah,
Your poor mother.
yeah. So
Wow.
so
How did your military experience influence your thinking about war or about military in general?
I think like a lot of people do, we wish we wouldn't get into it so quickly. I think there's a lot of other avenues we should venture into before we get into a military conflict. You know, Iraq is a good example. You know, Afghanistan, I believe that we belong in there, but Iraq, no.
Have you attended any reunions since you've been out of the service?
No,
Has your unit had any that you know of?
not that I'm aware of.
Did you get involved at all with the MIA or POW?
I've donated to them. As far as getting into the organizations, no. But I would support their, you know, their beliefs in it.
How did your military service affect your life?
Made me grow up. My outlook towards life was a total change.
In what way?
As my old bookkeeper told me when I first came back and I went back to work, she looked at me and she says, "You've grown up." And I go, "No, I'm still the same old Bob." She goes, "No." She says, "No, you have grown up considerably." So,
Do you feel your life would have been different if you had not served?
probably, but I'm glad I served. Made me see other things that the average person doesn't get to see. You know, like everything in life, there's always good and bad in everything. So you just try to cipher the best things that you can get out of life. So.
Is there anything else that you'd like to add that we haven't talked about? Any experiences or memorable incidents that we haven't discussed yet?
No, I think we've covered about everything.
That you're going to think of something when I leave. Well, Bob, I'd like to thank you for your service and thank you for your interview.
Yeah, you're more than welcome.